Genesis chapter 11, verse 4. We're about 2/3 of our way through our drash now. So if you can pace yourself, stand up and do a stretch if you need to stay awake. Slap your cheek, but not too hard. So verse 4 says, Vayomru hava nivnei lanu ir migdol rosho v'shamayim v'naseh lanu shem. So then they said, let's go, let's build for ourselves an il. Build an il. Not an ear, but a city. Let's make a city for ourselves. Migdol, and a migdol or migdal. This is a tower, a high tower like you see in the picture. And I want to comment on that word real quickly before we go on. So Sarna has an interesting bit about this. I just want to share from his Jewish publication commentary on the book of Genesis. He says a tower, that's a migdal in Hebrew, or migdol depending on pronunciation. The reference is certainly to the ziggurat, what I mentioned before. Akkadian, ziggurat, the lofty, massive, solid brick, multi-stage temple tower that was the outstanding feature of most Mesopotamian cities and dominated their landscapes. We dig them up today, the archaeologists. The term is derived from the Akkadian verb Zakaru, meaning to build high. This type of architecture seems first to have developed in Babylonia in the 3rd millennium BCE, so that's BC. In the dynasty of Akkad, there's the time period, its function, it is generally agreed, was to symbolize a mountain. The sacred mountain played an important role in most religions in ancient times. Rooted in the earth, with its head lost in the clouds, it was taken to be the meeting point of heaven and earth. And as such, the natural arena of divine activity, right? So the Greeks, they had Mount Olympus, right? Where they believed that Zeus and the other gods were up there. And then the Canaanites and some of the other worshippers of Baal, they have their mountain, Zaphon, Mount Zaphon, which is where we get the word for north in Hebrew, because it's kind of northwards up to that mountain. And they have poetry about how great is haarets, the Mount Zaphon. And then we have, of course, we have the accurate one, which is Mount Moriah, which is not because of the beauty of the mountain that it's so important, not because it's so high, as the pagans believed you need a high mountain, right? But it actually was because it was the sacred site where Avraham Avinu was willing to sacrifice his son, Yitzchak, on that mountain where our temple was built later, in the holy place. So you see, oftentimes the pagans have an idea, they're almost right. They've almost got it right. And then Hashem, through his actions or the Bible, they correct those things, saying, no, it's not about the mountain being so tall and being so beautiful. It's about what I have chosen. Right? I've chosen a place. And then my friend Abraham was willing to give his son as a clear, why do we have friends? Or what is the characteristic often we find in friends? One of the things that attracts people to a friend is common interests, right? Sometimes in common values. We share common values usually, right? And so here we have Avraham demonstrates a common characteristic to Adonai, to Elohim, where he is willing to give his son out of love. And so too, we see this echoed later when in Besorot Yochanan, when God gives his own son out of love as well, out of a love. For so great was his love, for he so loved Olam, right? Which really means the people of Olam, right? That he was willing to give his own son, that none would perish. That's his great desire, his love for his creatures. Okay, let's continue on. And its peak was in the sky. Now what else do they say? V'na'aseh lanu sheym. Here we have another emphatic hey, right? Let me mark it so you can see it. You don't have to know Hebrew to get it. Remember, this is our letter of the week, right? It's hey. This Josh is brought to you by hey. Sorry, I grew up on Sesame Street. My mother only let me watch public broadcasting, so Doctor Who and Sesame Street. So, brought to you by the letter G. You know, they do stuff like that. Or brought to you by the number 10. Anyway, so v'na'aseh, if any of you see that in the workups, the edits I make of the drashot later, that's why that's in there. It's kind of a quaint reference to Sesame Street, like a shout out to Sesame Street. All right, the old Sesame Street before they got weird. So v'na'aseh, so let us make for lanu, for ourselves, sheym, a reputation. Let's make a reputation, a name for ourselves. Sarna had a great comment on this again, so I want to share it. To make a name for ourselves, name here probably connotes monument, right? Remember, Hebrew words, context is very important when we pull out the nuance in biblical Hebrew. As in Isaiah 56, verse 5, the names of most of the important kings of Mesopotamia were associated with great building projects designed to assure the monarch's eternal fame. You kind of see like a twisted version of this with the Egyptians, with the Egyptian kings building pyramids. And inside the pyramid was the king's resting place, right? The sarcophagus would have a room in there. And so the idea is you have this, it's kind of like getting the attention of the gods. Look at this enormous thing I built, pointing skyward, right? You can see how a pyramid is a natural extension from a ziggurat, right? Or one from the other. They're very related. The royal name and titles were inscribed on the bricks and cylinder seals that were deposited in the foundations of the ziggurats. Thus, a temple inscription of Gudea of Lagash records that on account of the great name that he made for himself, he was received among the gods into their assembly. Nebuchadnezzar, who restored the ziggurat at Babylon, records in a commemorative inscription, the fortifications of Esagila in Babylon I strengthened and made an everlasting name from my reign. So in this case, he's not even building those things. He's reinforcing them. He's like he's doing a renovation project. So he made everlasting reputation for himself. He thinks because of that project with the ziggurats. Continuing on in the blue, pen nafutz al panei khol haarets. So pen is hard to translate into English, into modern English. In older English, it's like lest. This word lest, if you've ever seen that, L-E-S-T. So in modern English, we have to make it a bit more wordy. It's something like, so that this doesn't happen, right? So that does not. So that does not, okay? So that does not, so that will not. Nafutz is a passive participle from putz, to be spread out, or patsa, to be spread out. Al panei khol haarets, upon the face of the entire earth, right? So that we don't end up scattered all around. It's like the people realized the natural tendency for humans is to move away from each other. And they wanted to stop this. The Rashbam comments that according to the straightforward sense of the text, what was the sin of the generation of dispersion? Like, what are they really doing that's so terrible here? If it was the tower with its top in the sky, we read elsewhere about cities with walls sky high. Deuteronomy 1:28, he gives us an example. The Rashbam continues, rather, it is that the Holy One commanded them to be fertile and increase and fill the earth. Genesis 1, verse 28. But they chose instead to settle in a single place in order not to be, quote, nafutz al panei khol haarets, scattered all over the world. That is precisely why he decreed that they be scattered. That's the Rashbam. It's Midah keneged Midah again, measure for measure, because they refused to go and populate the earth as they were commanded, and they consolidated to build a city for themselves with multi-stage buildings and all these sorts of things that we see in modern metropolises. God intentionally scattered the peoples. Let's see. Lester says, we didn't even have Doctor Who. You don't have Doctor Who here? Are you sure? Because I'm older than you. Yeah, I remember my mother gave me a choice. We lived out in the woods at this time. There weren't many channels anyway, but the choice was I could either watch Doctor Who, it was on every day for 30 minutes, or I could watch it on Sunday for 2.5 hours. So I did that. I usually watch it on Sunday. One long, great showing of Doctor Who. The old one, obviously. Tet says, politicians today are making a name for themselves. Yeah, that's right. You know, it's funny. I won't say the politician's name, but where I live here, whenever you drive past a stadium or a building or a government center or a bridge, it always says, like, brought to you by Mayor so-and-so. Right? Like he's using the taxpayer monies to etch his name in eternity. It's the same kind of ego trips that these kings of old had. Fame, I'm going to live forever. You guys know that song? I'm going to learn how to fly high. It's like fame. A lot of people, they want fame. It's all about me. Look how great I am. I was here. I did stuff. Not realizing that our true mission is to be his imagers, to fulfill the divine will, however lowly or high that is. And we all are a piece of the puzzle. We're all important. Tet says this is after the flood. Is Nimrod a descendant of Cham? Yes. Nimrod is the son of Cush, who is the grandson of Cham. All right. Genesis chapter 11, verse 5. Continuing on. Vayered Adonai lirot et ha'ir ve'et migdol. Then Adonai descended. Yarad is to go down. He went down. Yarad. Let me color this word in. This is a good word. Note the Dalet is different from the Resh, right? They look similar. The Talmud Tractate Shabbat, it warns scribes to be careful of these letters because they look very similar. There's a little bump on the Dalet, right? So other than that, they're the same. Yarad. Yarad. Means to descend, to go down, but there's also a remez meaning of this word. It means to go down to, spiritually, to go down to a lower level, right? Like today, this even comes through in modern Hebrew. When someone immigrates, they make aliyah, they make a going up, they go up, meaning you're going from a lower place of holiness, i.e. outside of Israel, to a higher place of holiness, the chosen land, right? Israel, right? And then even in the Psalms they say, Na'alei Yerushalayim, let's go up to Jerusalem, right? So again, going up. Physically, yeah, it's a mountain, right? But spiritually going up to a holier place, right? When an Israeli becomes an OFW worker, right, or even a missionary to another country or something, when they leave the land, they're told that they're yarad, you're yored. Oh, you're yored, from this verb, yarad here, that I drew in red, colored in red. They're going down, right? Spiritually is implied, going down to a place of lower holiness, leaving the land of Israel, right? It's not seen as a positive. For example, to go work in America, in the United States, to leave Israel. Spiritually, it's not a positive. I saw a great poster one time. I can't remember where this was. But anyway, it's got a Jewish guy. He's in New York. He's I think he's around Wall Street or whatever, the finance district. If you've ever been to New York, you know this is where all the financial firms are. And he's walking, he's got a briefcase and a tie, and there's like bonds are holding back, I think ropes are holding him back, right? And it says, let my people go, right? Like it's so hard to leave America to go to Israel, for example, right? Because in America, it's a richer country, it's easier to make money, you know, all that kind of stuff, right? Israel, it's kind of hard, right? Even though they're an emerging first world nation, well, they're first world now, but even so, the pay's not the same, right? You pick any position in Israel, and it pays more in the United States. And the cost of living is cheaper in the United States, right? So let my people go. It's hard for Jews to leave America to go to Israel because of the finances and the comfort levels and all that kind of stuff. Let's see. There's some comments here. Let me get to the comments. Dr. Vera. Great. He's giving us the genealogy we want. Okay, good. Yeah. So Nimrod is from Cush. Right. Thank you very much. Okay. It's chapter 10, verses 6 to 8 gives us the genealogy there of Nimrod. All right, continuing on. Yeah, you're right. Dan says he's a Cushi, right? He had a Cush job. Tet says Todah. Okay, all right. So let's continue on then. So then Adonai descended. So he's having to come down to a less holy spot to deal with these people. Lirot literally means to see, right? But this word often has another nuance associated with it, depending on how it's being used, right? It can mean to know, to learn, right? It can mean, as we saw last week, this is not what it means here, but it can mean to have sexual relationships with, right? If you're seeing the nakedness of someone, right? Lirot ervat mishahu, right? You're seeing someone's nakedness. In this case, lirot is very interesting because two Targums translate it into Aramaic a different, they give this different translation. Both Onqelos and Pseudo Yonatan, they use this Aramaic phrase here. La'ith per'o, pardon me. La'ith per'o. To punish. To punish is how they translate. And the Lord was revealed to punish. Right? So here it's Wa'ith gali, he's revealed. Adonai was revealed, or he revealed himself. Why? La'ith per'o. To punish the work of the city and the tower which the sons of men had builded, right? I would say had built. So both Onkelos and Yonatan interpret this. There's a tradition there that God came down here to punish the people. To punish et ha'il, the city, the et ha-migdal, and the tower. Asher banu bnei-adam, which the human beings they had built. So bnei-adam, it means the sons of Adam or the children of Adam. This phrase also just means human being. Human beings. All right. Genesis 11, verse 6. Vayomer Adonai hen aham echad v'safaha achad lechulam v'zeh hachilam la'asot. Then Adonai said, look, behold, this is a different word for look, okay? It's like, take note. They are a united people, am echad, right? Just like God is united in his existence. Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem echad, right? He is united. Elohim, God. So too, he's noticing this people, they are united. V'safa achat, and they have a single dialect. Lechulam, all together, all of them. V'zeh hachilam la'asot, and this they have profaned themselves in doing, or to do it, or to make it. Right? So they profane themselves. It's kind of hard to see. It's from the verb chilel. Chila, maybe I'll put it there for those of you who are into the Hebrew, which I hope is everybody interested in the Hebrew. All right, is that going to show up? All right, we got all of it but the last letter. Come on, show up. Yay. So it's chilel, which is to profane oneself or to pollute. It also means like to shove straight through, like you'll see this as a participle to refer to those slain in battle, right? Like a sword pierced them, right? It can also mean to like pillage a virgin or something like that as well. So to profane, this is a infinitive form. That's why we have the mem at the end. It means they're the ones doing it. They have profaned in doing or making. The ata lo yibatzer mehem kol asher yazemu lasot. So now, it's kind of hard. Literally it says not, nifal, having been restrained, will not be restrained. from them. So basically the idea is if they stay on this path, there will not be anything restrained from them. Everything which they zamam. Zamam it means to devise, but usually it's used in context to devise evil, right? Like, there's another English word for this. Like, it's kind of like to make machinations, or I don't know if anybody thinks of it. Anyway, it's a wicked person's coming up with a plan, zamam, right? Which is interesting. We have another version of this root that comes into Mishneh Kibu, zomain, which is like falseness, falsity, right? So you can see kind of how it develops with this negative connotation. Scheme, yeah, okay, scheme. I think that might be good. Yeah, scheming, which they are scheming. So, for example, in the Talmud, there's various rules about how a judge should figure out if someone is an eid zomen, a false witness, right? Like a lying witness, right? So you can see the negative connotation developing. La'asot, to do or to make. Verse 7. Hava niridaha v'navela sham sefatam asher lo yishmeuhu ish sefat rehu. Okay, so this is Yetiv, by the way. In the Ta'amim, it's not the same as Mapahach, right? So it's Yetiv. Looks the same, but it's different. So, Hava, let's go, let's do it. Nereda, let's descend down. Exclamation point. Right, we have our hey, letter of the week, letter of the day. Let's descend down. Oh my goodness. It just decided to jump to all my stuff. All right, maybe I won't colorize that hay. It's just not worth it. Dr. Vera, when you said, Dr. Vera writes, halal is translated to begin. This is one meaning of a homograph of that word. So when you say it's translated that way, it can be translated that way. Yeah, sure, that's a possible translation. It can mean to begin. But I wouldn't say flatly is translated, because clearly we translated it differently here, right? In context. But you're right, it can mean to begin. Okay, let's see. Where am I at? Alright, that might have even been the better choice, I'm not sure. Okay, Havan Nereda, come, let us go down, exclamation point. V'navela, exclamation point, and let us, balal is the verb here, balal, mix. Let's mix. Sham, there. Sefatam, their dialect. Asher, which lo yishmeu, or okay, Asher is kind of strange here, so it's kind of like so that they will not hear ish sefat rehu. Literally, so that a person will not hear or listen to the language or the dialect of his fellow. Right? And this brought me to the book of Acts. Chapter 2, verses 4 through 13. It's an inversion of this concept. So in the Torah portion today, God is coming down to split the language of people so that people do not understand one another. Right? It's very interesting to me. In modern times, it seems like we're still working to get back to that place of understanding one another. There's Google Translate. There's all these things that are out there that make more and more apps that can translate on the fly. You can take a picture of a sign in Chinese or whatever, and it will tell you what it means. We're kind of working back. Humanity's working back to get back to that Babel wickedness place again, aren't we? Yeah. Thanks for the. If you want to see Dr. DeVere copied the New American Standard Translation over for Genesis 4:26. All right. So here we have the opposite happening. Instead of God dispersing mankind, and instead of God meddling, mixing, balal, our languages or our dialect into multiple languages, we have something else that's happening. So let's look at this together. They were all filled with the Ruach HaKodesh and began to talk in different languages as the Spirit enabled them to speak. Now there were staying in Jerusalem religious Jews from every nation under heaven. When they heard this sound, a crowd gathered. They were confused because each one heard the believers speaking in his own language. Right? So you have to remember, Jews living in other countries other than Israel, traditionally, we don't grow up with Hebrew as our language, right? You grow up with whatever the language around you is. That's usually the language or some derivative of it, right? Like Yiddish if you're in a German country or something like this. So they're up there because it's the festival of Shavuot, right? The holiday of the giving of the law. And so now, you remember Yeshua, just 10 days prior, he ascended into heaven, right? On the 40th count of the Omer, Yeshua ascended into heaven. But he commanded his disciples, don't leave Jerusalem. He told them not to go because, well, for one, it's a command to be at the temple, right? To be available in the temple, to bring your omers to the temple during Shavuot. And that's just coming up 10 days away from now. He didn't say this, but that's part of it, right? Keep the Torah. If you leave, there's no cars back then. Something can happen. Twist your ankle. Your donkey could have a problem, etc., etc. Stay in the city. Also, he had this plan to send the Comforter, to send the Ruach HaKodesh, and to be kind of a sonic boom in growing the faith immediately. Besides the thousands who saw him after he resurrected, he has this plan to send the Ruach. And so here we have the fulfillment of that. When they heard the sound, a crowd gathered. They were confused because each one heard the believer speaking in his own language. Totally amazed, they asked, how is this possible? Schulterkoya, was ist das? ¿Qué eso? Ano bayan? How is it that we hear them speaking in our native languages? We are Parthians, Medes, Elamites, residents of Mesopotamia, Yehuda, Cappadocia, Pontus, Asia, Phrygia, Pamphylia, Egypt, the parts of Libya near Cyrene, visitors from Rome, Jews by birth and proselytes, Jews from Crete and from Arabia. How is it that we hear them speaking in our own languages about the great things God has done? Amazed and confused, they all went on asking each other, what can this mean? But others made fun of them and said, they just had too much wine. That's Acts 2, 4-13. The complete Jewish Bible translation. It's a messianic translation of the Bible into English. Dr. Stern, who made this translation I quoted, he also found this interesting excerpt from the Talmud Tractate Shabbat, page 88, on the backside of the page. It says, Rabbi Yochanan said, what is meant by this verse? Adonai gives a word. Those spreading it are a great army. And the Talmud references Psalm 68, verse 12. The 11 is for the Gentile version, English 11. It means that every single word going forth from the Almighty was split into 70 languages. The school of Rabbi Ishmael taught that the verse is not my word, like a hammer that breaks a rock into pieces. Jeremiah 23, verse 29. This means that just as a hammer is divided into many sparks when it hits a rock or a piece of metal, so every single word that went out from the Holy One, blessed be He, split into 70 languages. Okay, so that's from Dr. Stern's Jewish New Testament commentary. He's quoting from the Talmud there, Shabbat, page 88. And it's fascinating, right? So we have this similar miracle happening at Sinai, where people saw the thunder, right? They saw the thunder. And we have God reversing, before that, the event of people being united by splitting their tongues. And then in the apostolic writings, we have a reversal of this, where even though people were not fluent in Hebrew, these Jews who came to visit, he speaks to them each in their own language, to show that the same God who miraculously divided the tongues is one who can bring people together by the power of the Holy Spirit. Hey, just one more to go, and you've completed this ancient triennial Torah cycle. This lesson was brought to you by the letter Hey. Please subscribe and click the bell. L'Adonai kol hakavod.